Druid, the original and primitive inhabitants of ancient Britain and Gaul. They are member of the learned class among the ancient Celts. They acted as priests, teachers, instructor and judges. The earliest known records of the Druids come from the 3rd century BCE. The origin of the word Druid is under dispute. Its Celtic word meaning is knower of the oak tree. But Max Muller believes that, like the Irish word druí, it means the men of the oak trees. Some believe the word to be of Teutonic origin, others ascribe it to the Welsh. A few traces it to the Gaelic druid, which means a wise man or a sorcerer. In Sanskrit the word dru means timber. Druids are a very powerful class in ancient Britain and Gaul. No one questioned them and their power over the normal peoples. The Druidic order is deservedly credited with having had a deep understanding of nature and her laws. They studied ancient verse, natural philosophy, astronomy, and the law of the gods, geography, physical science, some spending as much as 20 years in training. They had a fundamental knowledge of medicine, especially the use of herbs and simples. In the History of Magic book by Eliphas Levi had said following statement about Druids.
The Druids were priests and physicians, curing by magnetism and charging amulets with their fluidic influence. Their universal remedies were mistletoe and serpent's eggs, because these substances attract the astral light in a special manner. The solemnity with which mistletoe was cut down drew upon this plant the popular confidence and rendered it powerfully magnetic. The progress of magnetism will someday reveal to us the absorbing properties of mistletoe. We shall then understand the secret of those spongy growths which drew the unused virtues of plants and become surcharged with savour and tinctures. Mushrooms, truffles, gall on trees, and the different kinds of mistletoe will be employed with understanding biomedical science, which will be new because it is old. But one must not move quicker than science, which recedes, that it may advance the further.
This all the knowledge was taught from their secret school. This school was divided mainly 3 parts. The lowest of the 3 divisions was that of Ovate. The Ovates dressed in green, and this was an honorary degree, not needed special purification or preparation. In this part, they learned something about medicine, astronomy, poetry if possible, and sometimes music. The next division was called Bard. Its members were robed in sky blue for representing harmony and truth. Its members were assigned the labor of memorizing, at least in part, the 20,000 verses of Druidic sacred poetry. These bards were often chosen as teachers of candidates seeking entrance into the Druidic mysteries. Neophytes wore striped robes of blue, green, and white, these being the 3 sacred colors of the Druidic order. The final one was Druid. They always dressed in white for symbolizing of their purity, and used by them to symbolize the sun. Its particular labor was to minister to the religious needs of the people. To reach this dignity, the candidate must first become a bard braint. The spiritual head of organization was Archdruid. It was necessary for a priest to pass through the 6 successive degrees of the Druidic order. But some believe that the title of Archdruid was hereditary, descending from father to son. According to James Gardner, 2 Archdruids were in Britain, one on their Isle of Anglesey, and the other on their Isle of Man. Assume there were another one in Gaul. These Archdruid generally carried golden scepters and were crowned with wreaths of oak leaves, symbolic of their authority. The younger members of the Druidic order were clean-shaven and modestly dressed, but the more aged had long grey beards and wore magnificent golden ornaments. The educational system of the Druids in Britain was highest than their other colleagues on the continent, hence Gallic youths were sent to the Druidic colleges in Britain for their philosophical instruction and training. Eliphas Levi states that the Druid lived in strict abstinence, studied the natural sciences, preserved the deepest secrecy, and admitted new members only after long probationary periods. Many of the priests lived in like the monasteries of the modern world. They were associated in groups like ascetics of the Far East, but few married. But many of the Druids retired from the world and lived as recluses in caves, in rough stone houses, or in little shacks built in the depths of a forest. Here they prayed and meditated, emerging only to perform their religious duties. James Freeman Clarke described about beliefs of the Druids in his 10 Great Religions book.
The Druids believed in 3 worlds and in transmigration from one to the other, in a world above this, in which happiness predominated, a world below, of misery and this present state. This transmigration was to punish and reward and also to purify the soul. In the present world, said they, good and evil are so exactly balanced that man has the utmost freedom and is able to choose or reject either. The Welsh triads tell us there are 3 objects of metempsychosis: to collect into the soul the properties of all being, to acquire a knowledge of all things, and to get power to conquer evil. There are also, say, 3 kinds of knowledge: knowledge of the nature of each thing, of its cause, and its influence. There are 3 things which continually grow less: darkness, falsehood, and death. There are 3 which constantly increase: light, life, and truth.
When we talk about their temple, Charles Heckethorn said, in his book of the secret societies of all ages and countries,
their temples wherein the sacred fire was preserved were generally situate on eminences and in dense groves of oak, and assumed various forms: a circular, because a circle was the emblem of the universe; oval, in allusion to the mundane egg, from which issued, according to the traditions of many nations, the universe; or, according to others, our first parents; serpentine, because a serpent was the symbol of Hu, the Druidic Osiris; cruciform, because a cross is an emblem of regeneration; or winged, to represent the motion of the divine spirit. Their chief deities were reducible to 2: a male and a female, the Great Father and Mother Ahu and Caridwen, distinguished by the same characteristics as belong to Osiris and Isis, Bacchus, and Ceres, or any other supreme god and goddess representing the 2 principles of all being.
This is the valuable description of Druids in The Secret Teachings of All Ages, book by Manly P. Hall.
Like nearly all schools of the mysteries, the teachings of the Druids were divided into 2 distinct sections. The simpler, a moral code, was taught to all the people, while a deeper, esoteric doctrine, was given only to initiated priests. To be admitted to the order, a candidate was required to be of good family, and of high moral character. No important secrets were entrusted to him until he had been tempted in many ways, and his strength of character severely tried. The Druids taught the people of Britain and Gaul concerning the immortality of the soul. They believed in transmigration and apparently in reincarnation. They borrowed in one life, promising to pay back in the next. They believed in a purgatorial type of hell, where they would be purged of their sins, afterward passing on to the happiness of unity with the gods. The Druids taught that all men would be saved, but that some must return to earth many times to learn the lessons of human life and to overcome the inherent evil of their own natures. Before a candidate was entrusted with the secret doctrines of the Druids, he was bound with a vow of secrecy. These doctrines were imparted only in the depths of forests and in the darkness of caves. In these places, far from the haunts of men, the neophyte was instructed concerning the creation of the universe, the personalities of the gods, the laws of nature, the secrets of occult medicine, the mysteries of the celestial bodies, and the rudiments of magic and sorcery. The Druids had a great number of feast days. The new and full moon and the 6th day of the moon were sacred periods. It is believed that initiations took place only at the 2 solstices and the 2 equinoxes. At dawn of the 25th day of December, the birth of the sun god was celebrated. The secret teachings of the Druids are said by some to be tinctured with Pythagorean philosophy. The Druids had a virgin mother with a child in her arms, who was sacred to their mysteries, and their sun god was resurrected at the time of the year corresponding to that at which modern Christians celebrate Easter. Both the cross and the serpent were sacred to the Druids, who made the former by cutting off all the branches of an oak tree and fastening one of them to the main trunk in the form of the letter T. This oaken cross became symbolic of their superior deity. They also worshipped the sun, moon, and stars. The moon received their special veneration. Caesar stated that Mercury was one of the chief deities of the Gaul. The Druids are believed to have worshipped Mercury under the similitude of a stone cube. They also had great veneration for the nature spirits, fairies, gnomes, and undines, little creatures of the forests and rivers to whom many offerings were made. There were 3 degrees of the Druidic mysteries, but few successfully passed them all. The candidate was buried in a coffin, as symbolic of the death of the sun god. The supreme test, however, was being sent out to sea in an open boat. While undergoing this ordeal, many lost their lives. Taliesin, an ancient scholar, who passed through the mysteries, describes the initiation of the open boat in Faber's pagan idolatry. The few who passed this 3rd degree were said to have been born again, and were instructed in the secret and hidden truths which the Druid priests had preserved from antiquity. From these initiates were chosen many of the dignitaries of the British religious and political world.
However, Greek and Roman writers frequently made reference to the Druids as practitioners of human sacrifice. Caesar says those who had been found guilty of theft or other criminal offenses were considered preferable for use as sacrificial victims, but when criminals were in short supply, innocents would be acceptable. A form of sacrifice recorded by Caesar was the burning alive of victims in a large wooden effigy, now often known as a wicker man. But some historians have questioned whether the Greco-Roman writers were accurate in their claims.